Alrighty, what's good, y'all? I know I fell asleep in the last video, which was yesterday actually, but I was really tired yesterday, I'm not gonna lie. But we're not gonna stick to that for too long. We are in the next day, and we are now on grids. I think, yeah, we did a little bit of grids yesterday. This we're just gonna get it a little deeper into it. So I'm not sure if we were on this or not. Yeah, I think we're a little bit past this. So one thing I did test, I deleted this in the CSS display grid. That mainly just, you know what? Hold on. So this, what is this called? This property? This property display property. Okay, so grid is, let me see. Explain. CSS selector. Okay. So this selector, hope that didn't mess up anything. They made a class of grid and had the list. Mine's doesn't necessarily have to be grid. It could be labeled something else, like customer review. I think that might be better. Then on here, we'll change this to sir. Okay. Can I, come on. Customer review grid. Okay, so we have our width, height, the border on here as well. Well, I don't know why the border isn't going fully around that. If I made this full, yeah, I'm not sure why it's not going fully around that. You know, in here it's fully around. 400 pixels, 500 pixels, blue solid. Yeah, it's grid template column. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, so grid template columns. That's probably what's messing it up. I can see it right here. By default, grids contain only one column. If you were to start adding items, each item will be put on a new row. That's not much of a grid. To change this, we need to explicitly define the number of rows and columns in our grid. Okay. We can define the columns of our grid by using the CSS property grid template columns. Yes, I have that. And actually, you know what? Let me do it like this. Property creates two changes. It defines the number of columns in the grid. In this case, there are two. Second, it sets the width of each column. First, it defines the number of columns. I am sleepy, but I'm gonna push through it. Okay. First, it defines the number of columns in the grid. In this case, there are two. Second, it sets the width of each column. Okay. We can also define the size of our columns as a percentage of the entire grid's width. So 20% of the grid's width, 50%. Second, it sets the width of each column. 50% is the width, defines the number of columns. So 20%, what? Okay, so grid template columns, they have 100 pixels. Let's look at that. In this example, the grid is 1,000 pixels wide. Therefore, the column will be 200 pixels wide. Because it is set to be 20% of the grid's width. Oh, man. The second column will be 500 pixels wide. We can also mix and match these two units. In the example below, there are 3 columns of width 20 pixels, 40%, and 60 pixels. Okay, so I see that in the example, 20, 40, 60. The total width of our columns, 120 pixels, exceeds the width of the grid, 100 pixels. This might make our grid cover other elements on the page. In the next exercise, we'll discuss how to avoid overflow. So grid template columns. Grid template columns defines the number of rows and columns in our grid and what their sizes will be. So if I delete this, what happens? Okay, they're all pretty lined up, right? So how does it know exactly which I can't even talk, which grid to target? I need to stop yawning. Come on. 100 pixels, 50%, 200 pixels. So let's do this. I'm going to explain. Break this down in a simpler manner. What is the 100 pixels, or what is the 100 pixels rating percent, and also can you turn the pixel to EM? Very excellent writing on my end. Okay, the 100 pixels sets the width of the first column. Okay, so this is the width of the first column. 50% sets the width of the second column. So this is 100 pixels. This is 50%. Sets the width of the second column to half the grid's total width. The 200 pixels sets the width of the third column. Yes, you can use EM instead of PX for pix. Yes, you can use EM instead of pixels, for example. Grid template columns, 6 EM. Yeah, okay. Here, 6 EM and 12 EM depend on the font size of the grid container. Okay, and this is gonna sound really dumb, but it's not popping into my mind right now. What does EM stand for? I feel like I should have said encoding. M square, unit in typography and CSS, 1 EM for M square. 1 EM is 16 pixels. It helps make layouts flexible and okay. EM stands for M squared. And what does REM stand for in coding? Root M. In CSS, 1 REM equals the font size of the root element. For example, if the root font size is 16 pixels, then 1 REM is always 16 pixels. Okay, if the root font. Okay. No matter where it's used, this makes sizing more consistent across your web page. Okay. So I think EM is what I'm going to stick with. REM is root M squared. Okay. So this is the first column, second column, third column. 50% is 50% of the total width. Half the grid's total width. Yep. Okay. So then where do you get D and G from? If I have A, B, and C, okay, they have different boxes. I only have 3 boxes. So everything in this first column is going to be under that universal, or okay, here it is. Everything under this first column is universal to the first column. This number is universal to this. This number is attached to the second column, and likewise with the third. So that's why this looks like that. 50% of the total width, that's why the middle one looks like that. Let's do this one for 200 as well. I had no clue you could do this. Very interesting. So that's grid template columns. The main shtick of doing grid template columns is sizing columns consistently. And then I want to change these. So instead of 200 pixels, I'll probably let's do 120. Might be too big, yep. So let's do 12. And let's do 12 on here too. All right, we got that. So from here, we're gonna avoid falling asleep and create rows. We've learned how to define the number of columns in our grid explicitly. To specify the number and size of the rows, we're going to use the property grid template rows. Okay, so that was grid template columns, grid template rows, the number and size of the rows. So it's the same principle, top row, middle row, bottom row. Being that I only have 3, mute that. Being that I only have 3, I don't think I really need to mess with this. I don't think this will do much of anything anyway. Let me try. If anything, it'll make the bottom half of this smaller. So let's try 2em 50, or let's do 20%. Well, it's all on the same row, so 2em would be that value. Yeah, there's no third row, there's no second row. 2em would be that value because it's all on the same row. So 12, yeah. But you see the rest of the box is down here at the bottom. And even if we have 3 values, that blue solid line is still at the bottom. So if I wanted height, make that 100 or 200. Okay, yeah, 100. Okay, so this border is what's affecting the height and the width, not the height and the width of the grid. So if I take this out, oh, okay. Let me take out the height. Okay, let me take out the width. So then it expands. Interesting. So it affects the width. But it doesn't do much with the height. I could change this to 900 and the middle row will grow. Okay, so you could change the width. All right. That's creating rows. Grid template. The shorthand property grid template can replace the previous 2 CSS properties. Both grid template rows and grid template columns are nowhere to be found in the following code. Okay. So it's pretty much the layout of base times height, the way that I'm understanding it. Base is the rows, height are the columns. You could think of columns being high in length and high in height, and the columns being long in rows. So then here with fraction, let me see. You may already be familiar with several types of responsive units, such as percentages, ems, and rems. Yes, CSS Grid introduced a new relative sizing unit, FR, like fraction. By using the fraction unit, we can define the size of columns and rows as a fraction of the grid's length and width. This unit was specifically created for use in CSS Grid. Using FR makes it easier to prevent grid items from overflowing the boundaries of the grid. Consider the code below. Okay. In this example, the grid will have 3 rows and 3 columns. The rows are splitting up the available 400 pixels of height into 4 parts. The first row gets 2. Okay, so what is this used for? It makes it easier to prevent grid items from overflowing the boundaries of the grid. This is only used for grid. So if I had to apply this, I would use, well, I could use grid template. I don't think I'll have an issue. Let me see. So let's do grid. Just grid template. Oh, they're not letting me go. Grid template. Let's just copy these. And we'll delete this. So I know with grid template, this is rows and columns. Rows, columns. So this is, there's only one row. the columns, let me see some for FR. Expands it, but it's still small. Columns, let's see. I know -1 is crazy, but it's weird how this grows the lower numerical value in value you get. And that's not even doing anything. Like if I wanted more space, would I be able to get it? I already have 40 FR. Hands itchy. 90. This is so weird. But it's a fraction of the numbers, so I might have to like do a really buku number just so it can fit the grid. Okay. Repeat the properties that define the number of rows and columns in a grid can take a function as a value. Repeat is one of these functions. The repeat function was created specifically for CSS grid. Okay, repeat defines the number of rows and columns in a grid. Example above, using the repeat function will make the grid have 3 columns that are each 100 pixels wide. It is the same as writing okay. Honey. Okay, you're saying repeat 3 Hondo. I think I understand. If I wanted to repeat it twice, I would do 2. See that down here as well. Then they have the pixels. Okay. So then they also have min-max. So far, all the grids that we have worked with have been a fixed size. The grid in our example has been 400 pixels wide and 500 pixels tall. But sometimes you might want a grid to resize based on the size of your web browser. Okay. So how are you using min-max? Okay, here it is. Min-max 50 pixels, 300 pixels. In these situations, you want to prevent a row or column from getting too big or too small. If you have a 100 pixel wide image in your grid, you probably don't want its column to get thinner than 100 pixels. So we have grid template columns. They use min-max, 100 pixel. Oh, so this is the minimum and that's the maximum. The first and third columns will always be 100 pixels wide, no matter the size of the grid. The second column, however, will vary in size as the overall grid resizes. The second column will always be between 100 and 500 pixels wide. Okay, yeah. So on here, yeah, that's why grid template. Grid template. And they have all these shorthands too. So they have this repeat. Hundred pixels, min max, then 100 pixels. Well, this is grid template columns. This seems like a headache though. I'm gonna just leave it. So on here they have 100 pixels, so 12 EM. My min max right here. And okay. EM. Then let's go up to 30 EM. Utilize a comma. And that should be cool. Because without this, well, it's still not moving. I think it's still important to have the min max. Let me look one more time. Using min-max, change the second column to be 50 pixels and 300. What happens to the other columns when the second column reaches the 300 pixel limit? Mine wasn't doing this at first. At all. Then again, this fits the entire width of the screen. The only thing I see is height. Border, I see no width. Which is leaving me a little bamboozled. Alrighty, I'm taking a break. I might fall asleep, I'm not gonna lie. Alrighty, so we are back. I just noticed that the names that I put are just completely random. Shout out to Kevin James, though. Legend. But let us get back into it. So we were on min-max. And okay. Style. And it wasn't really doing anything as far as I could tell. But at the same time, this isn't hitting the edge of the width. Oh, not that. Where is this? Okay, here we go. This. We're gonna, that's our plan. Why isn't this? Okay. Okay, I think I got it. But anyway. And then on top of that, I'll expand this. There's no, like this fulfills the width of the page. What am I missing? Height 500 pixels, border 2 pixels, blue solid, yes. This. Now we have columns and we have rows. So do I expand my rows even more? No, you expand the columns. So then from here, still can't tell. Not 240. Let's just do 40. So hold on, let me make sure I'm doing this right. If the min max is 50, that's probably why they use FR, the fraction. Let me see some. I'll take this. I'm gonna delete these. Add this. It doesn't even fill the screen. Oh. Okay. So me specifying the width was kind of messing that up. Gotcha. Very interesting. So let me actually go back in time a little bit. So we actually wanted, okay, so let me actually go back in time a lot of bit. You actually want to delete this. Okay, now it's working the way it should. Okay. Now this, make it 20, it's still kind of, once again, this fractional estimate might be the way to go. I'm not gonna lie. This is one. Like I want to expand the bottom. Is this it? No, it's only focused on the last one. Grid template. Hold on. They have height 500 pixels. Is that it? But now the entire box. Let me look at this again. I'm trying to figure out, is the fraction the better way to go? Because this is one big shorthand. The repeat defines the number of rows and columns in a grid, can take a function as a value. Repeat is one of these functions. The repeat function was created specifically for CSS grid. So repeat 300 pixels. The back of my mind is telling me like, don't spend too much time on this. It might be important to have a grid in the future, but I know what has worked so far is utilizing this min-max, utilizing height. I do want to figure out how to fill this space instead of just having one big. Then again, I did 500 pixels. Let's just do 50. We still have this line down here. This is the border to, that's just the border. The height. It's got to be the beige, yeah, the box. But why is it? Why is there so much space in between this? No, it's got to be the grid itself because the box, it only focuses on the box. There's not much spacing. There's no spacing, actually. Border radius. Mm. I'm really missing something. Because when it was this, there's no access. How's that labeled on their box? You know what? Yeah. Didn't even think about that. Okay. Maybe it's something with this shorthand. Yes, you're repeating. Let me go back. Someone's telling me not to use this. I don't like that. The shorthand property grid template can replace the previous two CSS properties. Both grid template rows and grid template columns are nowhere to be found in the following code. The values before the slash will determine the size of each row. The values after the slash determine the size of each column. Like this is 22. If I wanted to make this 42, you're expanding the column. If you want to expand the rows, expanding the top and bottom. So anything after the slash determine the size of each column. The values before will determine the size of each row. So something was going on with this. That's repeat, min, max. I was on this one. Repeat 3-1-FR. Let me go back to repeat. Rows and columns in the grid can take a function as a value. Repeat is one of these functions. The repeat function was created specifically for CSS grid. Repeat function will duplicate the specifications for rows or columns a given number of times. Using the repeat function will make the grid have 3 columns that are 100 pixels wide. 3 columns that are 100 pixels wide. So in this, I'm just making myself grid template. All right, how many columns do we have? We have 3. Repeat. Right here, 3 columns at 42 PM. Then the way they had min max, not that. We're gonna that off. Okay. We have it after. This is for the column. This side is for the column, right? Tripping right now. The values after the slash determine the size of each column. After is column. I'm assuming you could do the same thing with before with rows, the same. You know what? Columns is the width of everything. So, okay, repeat 342 EM. Slash FR min max. And that's the length of the column. Okay. So this is actually, see, that's what I'm tripping off of. This is rows. So this is 40 slash columns. Pretty much all of this. And then that should be it. So my rows, the size of my rows. So if I change this to 20, this should reduce in size. Yep. Okay. think I got it. Oh, why is this so big? Okay. Having a height of anything won't, it'll just add extra padding. Well, not padding, but wait. Let me see. I guess it filled it in, having height. Because without it, oh no. It does. What? This is so weird. Yeah, that shrinks up. Surely. That is so weird. Okay. Well, moving on. So you definitely need that height. You have your grid template, repeat 28, 3 rows that are 20 EM each. And then 42 EM min max, 12 and 30. EM for the third row. The second column, however, will vary in size as the overall grid resizes. The second column will always be between 100 and 500 pixels wide. So that second column is always going to be the one. Maybe not, because the freaking first column is the one that's subjectable then. The first and the third, this is very, very interesting already. I do as well. I need margin. That's the other thing too. They don't even have margin on here. There's definitely a margin. Border radius, color, background, gap. Oh, that's for this. Height, border, display. Yeah, there's no margin. There's clearly a margin. So let me see. Okay. Grid gap. If we want to have spacing, Yeah, for a review, I think I would. So with this, you utilize gap. 3 pixels, 5 pixels. Row gap, column gap. So this is row column. It's this solid blue border. It's bothering me. Yeah. That's what was really bothering me. That 5 EM. Don't really need a column gap because there's no columns. There's only one row of items. I think 5 EM might be too much. Do want this third one to get or maybe I should not dumb them down, but make this 22. Let's reduce them to 22. Fit the screen a little bit better. But that's the other thing, it's not fitting. And they're not even centered. Let me see. That's the text inside the grid. Where's our grid? Customer reviews container. How do I flex justify content? That's what I need right there. Yes, sir. Just leaving it as flex pretty much did the job. Nope, no it didn't. No it didn't, I lied. That's exactly what I needed, yep. Okay. We learned about grid gap, grid items, cool. Grid row starting grid out. We can make single grid items take up multiple rows. Remember, we're no longer applying CSS to the outer grid. We're adding CSS elements sitting inside the grid. Not tripping off that. Not tripping off that. Okay, that's none of what I need right now. All right. So I like the way this turned out. The Flexbox really gave it the final touch that I needed. Now there are advanced grid items. Let's see what these are talking about. Let's go back to one. This would have been nice for the menu. I'm not gonna lie. Once again, I kind of want to keep this so I have an idea of how, with all of these, where's my menu? I use Flexbox to get this all set up. I think for the next project, if I do have something similar, I'll just make it with this. Now I'm curious. Grid template areas. Name sections of your web page to use as values in the grid row start, grid row end, grid column start, grid column end. Okay. The HTML creates a web page with 5 distinct parts. Okay, so you can make your own areas. So this is like, instead of using Flexbox and dealing with the body, you could just make it an entire grid. CSS grid layout. There are 2 axes in a grid layout. The column or block axis and the row or inline axis. Column axis stretches from top to bottom. Yep. Just find items and property position grid items along the inline or row axis. This means that it positions items from left to right across the web page. This property is declared on grid containers. So how is this being applied where each column inside of the main element is 250 pixels? So grid, display grid, grid template columns, rows. Wait. It says there's 3 rows. 400, okay. So the gap is 20 pixels, margin top, 44 pixels. They're centered. I don't know if this shit is actually centered, but alrighty. We have our image. Box shadow. All right. We are overrunning on our time, I'm not gonna lie. Margin top. Yeah. I wanna know how they got this line right here. That's gotta be a border something. description, line height. Change that to 5. Okay, that's all of the lines, not just. I don't even see a color on here. Okay, hold on. Because this is clean, but how do you. Oh, man. Is this it? Is this it right here? Yep, minutes. Okay, just blue. No. No. Width, height, object, fit, padding. Beyond me. Absolutely beyond me. Or out of position a grid within its parent element. We can use justify content to position the entire grid along the row axis. This property is declared on grid containers. Did we do that? Or basically did that? We did flexbox though. Reviews container. Yeah, we did. You know what? If we did display grid, justify content center, it stays the same. Oh wait, I'm not even looking at the right thing. Yeah, it stays the same. I'll take this out. It's off center. Literally the same. Literally the same. But I think it's, since it's a grid, the preparation is to use a grid. I don't know why this is kind of bothering me, I'm not gonna lie. Did they talk about grid template areas in here? Yeah, that's you highlighting specifics in the CSS. So weird. So it's like Flexbox, but its own thing. Justify self specifies how an individual element should position itself with respect to the row axis. Align self specifies how an individual element should position itself with respect to the column. Okay, so it's Flexbox, but a little bit more detailed, a little bit more specified, depending on how big your grid rows and columns are. Definitely should be used for what I'm using it for. This, there's like a customer review section, or better yet, for menu items to keep it all aligned. Okay, we have been explicitly defining the dimensions and quantities of our grid elements using various properties. This works well in many cases, such as a landing page for a business that will display a specific amount of information at all times. However, there are instances in which we don't know how much information we're going to display. For example, consider online shopping. Often these web pages include the option at the bottom of the search results to display a certain quantity. Search results for term 30. New rows, okay. It's an algorithm built into the specification for CSS grid that determines default behavior for the placement of elements. So the importance of implicit versus explicit. We've been explicitly utilizing grids, but there are moments where there might be more elements displayed in the search or when displaying all search. So that's when implicit comes into play. It's an algorithm that will fill up the rows first and add new rows as necessary. They'll only be tall enough to contain the content within them. Two properties to specify the size of grid tracks added implicitly. Oh wow, maybe I don't want to use EM. Hmm. If we did not specify grid auto rows, the rows would be auto adjusted to the height of the content of the grid items. Oh, an index. Copy and paste the last two recipe cards to add two more recipe cards to the bottom of the page. Yes. Okay, only because this is 3, I actually want to see this in person. So, thank you. So delete the height of 1600 because I have done that. Just having a basic height. Pop in HTML, copy and paste the last two recipe cards. So big parfait and sweet churros. Ooh. I think that's it. Okay, not quite. Thought this was the. No, it's not actually. All right, hold on. So I do need that div. Yep. Examine the height of the new cards. What do you notice? They're shortened. Cut off at the bottom. Let's make additional cards the same height in style CSS inside the main rule set. Right. Add the grid auto rows. Property. Set the height of the implicitly defined rows to 500 pixels. So yeah, you just do 500. Okay. So instead of having a separate height, you want to, because that's explicit, you're explicitly putting that down. To implicitly grid auto rows, because the rows are the height. What did I, let's just do, keep it like that. This looks clean. Addition to setting the dimensions, specify the order in which they are rendered, specifies whether new elements should be added to rows or columns, and is declared on grid containers. main. So if it's going to the column, if I wanted to change this to rows, it'll be all or not rows, but row. Yeah, up and down. Instead of me saying up and down, vertical. Okay. New elements should fill columns from top to bottom and create new columns when there are too many elements. And this, damn, it's not even centered either. So this maintains the height implicitly. Whenever something new is added, this maintains, what's the best way to say it? It maintains the overall look of new elements on the page to specify whether they're going to be left and right or horizontal or vertical, shown horizontally or vertical. Once again, this is better for menu items and clothes. Probably isn't the best to use for 3 customer reviews and you're not going to add any more. But yeah. Let's see what the last thing is on here. Might be a thank you. Yeah, just a review. So I would definitely keep this in mind. Once again, I probably should do it. I might have to switch these things around just so I can maintain the integrity of this menu. Flexbox, yeah, that needs to be swapped. Bad. That needs to be swapped with this, with the way I'm creating this. But that's the way I was learning. I'm not hating on it. Well, yeah, we are definitely one step closer. That's grid. That's really it for grid. Yep. So the next thing we have is, well, that's Java. Responsive design. Take a look at that. Try to get that done, God willing, by tomorrow. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.